Hi again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Alumni Chats, a weekly podcast featuring alumni from the Department of Broadcasting and Journalism here at Western Illinois University. My name is Buzz Hoon, and I'm the host of the podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Jock Hedblade from the class of 1983. Is that right, Jock? Did I get that right?
82.
82, okay.
Yeah, I'm a little older than you thought.
That's very good. And, Jock, we always begin with where you are now, which just kind of let anybody know where you are and what's going on in life, and then we'll kind of work our way backwards.
Sure. Well, right now, I have returned to my hometown of Macomb, Illinois, and I am the executive director of the tourism board here in Macomb, the Macomb Area Convention and Visitors Bureau, otherwise known as Unforgettable for Gatonia. And so it'll be an interesting story on how my path starting in broadcast ended me up back in my hometown in tourism.
It will make for a wonderful movie. That's what I think. After reviewing everything that's happened in your life, I think, now that would be a great story.
Well, it's been an interesting one for me. I'll say that.
Well, I have the pleasure of doing this podcast, and part of it is there are two parts to this. The beginning is talking about the formative years of Macomb or WIU, and the other part is what happens in somebody's life. I love hearing the stories, and we have lots to explore into those areas. But let's begin all the way back and talk a little bit about the formative years. You were from the Macomb, you grew up in the Macomb area, and your dad was working at WIU. Can you talk a little bit about your decision to go to WIU and some of the ways that it impacted your life?
Yeah. I grew up here since the time that I was 2, and my father was the head photographer at the university. And so because of that, I had spent a lot of time growing up as a child, out of the university. At that time, my father worked at the Visual Production Center, which was at that time in Memorial Hall on the 4th floor. That's where all the radio, television was, all of that. So I got exposed at a very young age to not only a lot of the people, the professors and that stuff there, but to where the radio station was and where the television station was on top of photography and that stuff. So it was just kind of a natural thing that happened. And when it was time to go to school, I wasn't completely sure, like most kids were, what they were going to do. So I thought, I'll get out at Western and I'll start there and see what happens. I always knew that I wanted to do something in the entertainment realm. And once I got through, the prerequisites and that stuff, I was just really drawn to broadcasting just from, being a kid and wandering in, when nothing was happening in the broadcasting station and that stuff there, and looking around. Or Tug Haddock would, take me into the radio station and let me see what it was like. So I just kind of naturally gravitated towards it and stayed here and got my degree. I knew a lot of people already, and it was a comfortable place for me to be. And I've always been extremely fond of Macomb itself. It was just I had a very, growing up here in the 60s and 70s was really idyllic.
Yeah.
You had this town that was very Mayberry in where it was. So in a lot of ways, rather than it being the 60s and 70s, it felt like the 40s and 50s or 50s and 60s. But with Western Illinois University here and the culture and the cultural revolution that had been going on at that time, you didn't miss anything, that it was you had that whole other side. You had this very rural, bucolic situation. And then you had this higher education where, at that time, Crosby, Stills and Nash, or, Red Skelton, Bob, everybody came through Macomb.
Yeah.
So it was this beautiful symbiosis between the times. You know what I mean? It was kind of magical. And so I wasn't at college. I wasn't in a big hurry to get away. It wasn't until I graduated that I was in a really big hurry to leave Macomb. Not because I was, I was tired of the town. I loved it. I was just ready to, start my life and start my career.
So reviewing your career, and you see all these, there are two things that I really noticed. First of all, a wonderful work ethic. And the other part is this great self-confidence to create, that you are a wonderful creator. So I'm wondering, did that come, was that in part of what your parents kind of instilled in you, and encouraged you to be, find your path that way?
Yeah, I think in a way that was very hands off in a lot of ways. I mean, my folks, although in some ways I wish they would have encouraged me more, but what they did was really let me find my own way. They didn't try to push me one direction or another. They really allowed me to kind of develop and just naturally find, what worked for me. They always realized that I had a lot of talent. And excuse me, my office is right in the train depot, and a train's going by right now. So there you go. But part of the charm.
That's right.
But they always recognized that I was talented. I think my father would have loved it if I was an athlete. He was an all-star, football player, and he would coach me in games, and I had some athletic ability, but never on the level that he did. But to his credit and my mom's credit, they recognized the artistic side of me, whether that be drawing or acting or making tapes or and they fostered that. And so, I think there were times when they were like, you might want to major in something, that would really, give you a solid, like you're good at sales, just because of what they hear. But they were pretty good about just letting me be whoever I was. And I think that made a big difference in me, rather than, I had a kind of an organic lead into my career. And that's why it took me so long to actually, I think, get really established in my career, because it was so organic. I just kind of let life lead me, and I had this kind of secured path to, where I ended up. But I ended up exactly where I was supposed to be, and I mean, like, back here in Macomb. It's an interesting. It was very organic.
So when you're at WIU, and one of the names that you told me about, Tug Haddock, which has an individual in Memorial Hall that impacted a lot of lives and shaped a lot of people. And some of that was, tough love, and some of that was just the fact that he gave them encouragement to try to, find their way as well.
Yeah, I never got to experience Tug as an instructor or anybody, because he had passed away and retired prior to that, me being there. And all I have experienced from Tug, because I was a young boy, was just a super kind, sweet man. He really took to me for whatever reason that was, and was very kind to me. And that's why I got to experience all that. So I don't know him as a teacher in the way that students know him, but I know him as a teacher in his kindness as a human being, and his caring for me, and allowing this little kid that in most cases would be a pest, tag along with him, and him showing me these things. And I don't think either Tug or I would have ever understood the impact that actually had on me. And a kid you don't know, you're just there doing it, but it clearly had a very strong impact on him. So, and he, without, I think it'd be easy to say, without Tug Haddock at WIU, broadcasting as we know it, or what it became, wouldn't exist. He worked like crazy, that we have an NPR station, and all of that here and television, all of it. It's all really due to Tug making that happen out of nothing. He's quite a guy.
So what other memories do you have from WIU in those late 70s, early 80s kind of, faculty members or other students, or just, the campus itself?
Well, because they were the late 70s and early 80s, you know, the memory is foggy, not just because of the distance, but because of what was happening during those days, right? I remember it being, I remember a film class with Don Crawford that is very memorable to me. I took his advanced film class when I was a little bit younger, but this is a guy that I also grew up with. And I remember it was a song and interpretation thing that I did. And I went and shot this film, and I went on vacation and was out in San Francisco and shot at the Golden Gate Bridge, and came back, and somehow either when I took it for processing, it was done wrong, or I had exposed the film. The mystery is out there at this point, but all the film came back blank. So the night before, I'm literally drawing on the blank stuff. I had some footage that I could put, and then I was syncing it up with the thing. And I'm just like, I'm done. I stayed up all night long. I'm stapling it together to kind of, and I get in the class and synced it up, and it played perfectly. Soundtrack's actually off as a tape recorder, and it goes off without a hitch, and I get an A for it. So it's like I thought I was going to flunk this thing. And then another person that was really a big influence on me was Mark Grigoroff. I don't know if many people remember that name. Mark was only around for a few years when I was there, but he taught advanced television production. And the reason why he wasn't there long is because Mark was one of these guys that, he'd go out and he'd work in the business, and then he'd come back and he'd teach. And then he'd want to go back out in the business and work again. So he understood what's happening. He's in Japan now, but he really was a guy that spotted a talent in me that maybe I didn't even know that I had, and was really great at nurturing that without playing favorites with me or anything. But he would always push me a little harder, to make sure that what I did was good. And I ended up having some pretty advanced stuff in the TV class that the other kids did. And at that time, you do a song interpretation, and people just have a book on an easel and would, you'd flip through the pages and play a song. But I was doing stuff like lip syncing and choreographing an entire song, doing a whole production, doing it. Mark really appreciated that, so he was a big influence for me out there.
So when you leave WIU, what's your goal? What is your dream as you're leaving out? I'm going to do this.
Well, I thought when I was at Western, I was in broadcasting, but I always kind of I thought I wanted to be an actor, an entertainer, or a comedian or something like that. But I never really had the guts. There's a long story about stage fright that happened to me. But I had a grad student come over that was getting his headshots done by my father, who would do that for a lot of the students if they came over. So when they're starting out, they'd have their 8x10, which you needed back then as an actor.
Okay.
And my dad said, "Hey, my boy works over there. He's in the other side in the graphics department, but he's always interested in acting and all that stuff." And anyway, this guy comes over and says, "There's open auditions tomorrow in your building." And I was like, I don't know what to do. He goes, it's a student thing. Just go over there. So I went over there and auditioned, whatever that meant. I didn't know what it was. And I got cast in 2 plays. And so this is a long story to get to. So I ended up kind of minoring in theater. And I ended up getting a talent scholarship from Gene Kozlowski that paid for my last couple of years of school. So anyway, the point is, when I got out of school, I thought, I'm going to be an actor. That's what I'm going to do. And I pursued that and had some success, got on a couple of TV shows, was a main character on Unsolved Mysteries to my chagrin as I watch it now, and became a SAG actor, and then developed went to Second City, went through all the classes there, and then developed a show that was an improvisational comedy show that was a big thing at that point in the 80s in Chicago. I'd always I wanted to do something different than the normal sketch comedy thing. So I had this background in broadcasting. I had never forgot about that. And so got together with some people and we had video in with that, like, you know, commercials and that stuff. And really kind of got back into the realm of work. I got some friends that would go in the middle of the night to the editing studio and they'd let this person edit in there so she could learn how to edit. So she was learning how to edit. I was learning how to do more production of this stuff. And I got to where that show got a lot of really great reviews. A lot of people saw it. SNL came, writers from it came, and actually borrowed one of our bits called Chia Head. And but I got kind of back in the realm. And when I was done with that show, I had like a reel, which I hadn't had. There was no way to have that. And through that, I met other people and knew I kind of wanted to. I was pretty good on stage, but it terrified me. You know, I didn't feel comfortable doing that, but I felt really good producing and directing that show and doing writing on it. And so through that, I'm like, man, I really think I enjoy, you know, getting back to this television stuff and video, that stuff, more than I like getting up there and performing. And eventually, through friends and connections and that, I got my reel to Fox Television in Chicago. And they had Fox Thing in the Morning with a man named Bob Surratt. That name might be familiar to a lot of people. He was on WLS radio. When I was growing up here in Macomb, I would listen to Bob Surratt on WLS, the Big 89, the 50,000 watt blowtorch that went.
Absolutely.
And loved Bob Surratt. So I somehow got my reel into them. They were looking for somebody to do some creative stuff. And this is a good story here because we talk about the perseverance, I guess, that I had, which was naive on some levels, I guess. But the word got back to me that they liked my reel and they thought it was very creative, but I hadn't had a real job of any type like that in the business. And this was a full producer job. You know, normally you go into these things, as you know, is that you're going to start off as a PA and then be an assistant producer. You're going to work your way up. So they weren't sure of it. They liked the material, they didn't know. Now, there was a man named Randy King behind the scenes there that was an operations director that was very keen on me. He thought I had what it took. But Bob just wasn't ready to pull the trigger. So I wrote this long letter to Bob Surratt because I knew at this time I was in my late 30s. I was like, if I don't get a real career here soon that I can support myself from, I'm going to be in trouble. And this really felt like kind of a last shot for me. So I wrote this letter to Bob Surratt because Bob Surratt had gone from being one of these top disc jockeys to being a television personality in Chicago and hosting this morning show. And he had been on West 57th on CBS, which was a network show. And I just wrote him and I appealed to I said, listen, Bob, I understand why you'd be risky to take a chance on me, not knowing what I could do or what I'd be able to. But at one point, somebody had to take a risk on you, be it in radio or in television. And they did, and you paid off in spades, and you're a superstar now because of it, and you deserve that chance. I'm just asking you to give me that chance. 2 weeks later, they offered me the job.
Nice.
Yeah. And at that time, I was working in a cigar store with my best friend during the cigar boom, where I, really met a lot of my celebrity friends through the cigar business rather than the broadcasting business. They called me on a Friday afternoon and asked me if I wanted the job. They called me at the cigar store. I said, yes, I want the job. When do you want me to start? Monday. It was a Friday. I had to literally quit for my friend. So on Friday afternoon, I left a cigar store. On Monday morning, I walked into, WFLD television, blind as a bat, figuring out what I was going to do.
And that door opened. And now you start to work, you start to get work and jobs and start to do all types of things, which I'm wondering, did the early experiences as an actor and just being in front of people help you in terms of what you were going to start to do as a producer and a
You know what?
director?
That's a good question. I've never been asked that, but I think so. Particularly when you were working with celebrities and such, or booking. That background or directing or anything like that, understanding the mind of a performer, whether or not I was one or not, I understood the process. I understood
Right.
what it took. And, I wasn't a bad performer. It just didn't give me a lot of, I didn't get a lot of fulfillment out of that. But I think having that ability to understand what the person on the other side, be it whoever I'm producing, if it was Ro Khan on WLS radio, knowing the ego and the fragility of that and the insecurity of that, which I had too, and understanding what they might need, I think was a big impact for me. I forged really strong bonds with Bob Surratt and Ro Khan being their producers, and bonds that go today. I'm still in contact with all of those people. So yeah, I think it really did make a difference. Just understanding the process that a performer goes through. And, just because you're not an actor or a comedian, if you're on the radio for 4 hours a day, or if you're even sitting there reading a teleprompter, you're a performer.
Yeah.
There's part of that's an innate ability that not everybody can do. And I think that did help.
So among the things that you have accomplished, which is just amazing, you are a I hope I get this right, 4-time Emmy winner.
I am, yes.
And so of those, that one of the really cool things is the documentary on the Smashing Pumpkins.
Yes.
And so of the things that you have done, is that one of the most rewarding projects?
Yes, it was, because for a number of things. First of all, at the time, this was for the Smashing Pumpkins were going to end, and they wanted it documented, and they called a bunch of people. They called people at Fox, but nobody was getting back to them. And finally, somehow, Joe Shanahan, who run the Metro, who I had known because my brother and I had done these little TV. Local televisions, public access shows where we would interview the Pixies or whoever it may be, right, that come in. So we had a relationship with Joe Shanahan. He knew that I had moved to Fox TV, got a hold of me and said, hey, we're trying to get a hold of somebody to do this documentary on the Smashing Pumpkins, and nobody's returning our call. So it just wasn't getting to the right people. So Randy King, who had been my champion there at Fox, called him, and I said, hey, they want to do this documentary. He says, yes, let's do it now. Why didn't this get to the right people? At the time, I wasn't super familiar with the Smashing Pumpkins music. I knew it, but it just wasn't my bag. And I also had heard that Billy Corgan can be a rather cantankerous, kind of a crazy guy. But I was working with my co-producer on this was Lou Hinkhouse, who had done the same kind of stuff that my brother I had, and had footage and had been interviewing the Smashing Pumpkins from their very, like, he put them on television, public access, their first performance on TV ever. He had all this footage. Wow. Billy knew him. They brought me in to be the producer on that. I interviewed Billy. We interviewed Billy for about an hour. We had Billy be the voice of it. Billy was unbelievably kind and open. I think my interest and background in music and working in radio prior to that with my brother also, who is a graduate from Western Illinois University, we put together a really show that we were really proud of, that Billy Corgan said is the best documentary he'd ever seen on the band. And winning the Emmy for me wasn't so much about winning the Emmy, but I think finally, for the first time in my life, I had proved something to myself. And it was a sea change for me in confidence. It really was a huge shift for me. After that, not only did my career open up and flourish, but I think a lot of that just had to do with me not, having faith in myself that it would, that to let it be rather than trying to control it. So that was the great thing about that Emmy Award. Not so much the accolades, just what it did for me as a person. Because you know what, awards are just awards. I mean, they're a great recognition, but it's recognized within the industry and your peer. And there's a lot of politics involved with them too. There really are. But that meant a lot to me to say that these peers recognized this guy who, came out of nowhere, that they did, 2-3 years prior to that, they didn't even know if they wanted to hire me. And we, got this award for it. It meant a lot on that level, not on an ego level at all, but on just a level of me feeling like, okay, you know what, maybe you're actually good enough to compete in this realm. Maybe you can actually do this. And so that was good. That was good for me from that standpoint.
So other jobs that you worked on the Steve Harvey Show as a producer?
I did. So what I did after Fox, this is another great thing about Western and preparing me, in both television and radio. I was able to bounce back and forth because it's a fickle business, and you lose jobs in business not necessarily because of how you perform. It's because some other company came in and bought this and they're going to do this or going to do that, and for no good reason at all, you're out of a gig unceremoniously and almost instantly. But I had forged bonds and reputations. I lost my job at Fox TV, but when I was at Fox TV, I used to go into Mancow's Mancow Muller's show, the Mancow Madhouse, which is a nationally syndicated radio show at the time. And we would do live remotes from him for TV, like what's happening. And he liked me. And he called me the day that I was let go at Fox and said, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm actually in the car on my way down to Macomb because I figured I'm going to take a little vacation, chill out in my hometown, get on my boat out in Argyle Lake. And he said, okay, take all the time you want. When you want to come back to Chicago, you've got a gig. And I just dovetailed right into radio from there. And then from there, I left that. And after Mancow got fired, actually, what happened? So that job ended. And then I did a little freelancing and ended up back. And I had a great story about, I got a phone call from a person who had been an intern of mine at Fox TV. She was now working as a full producer at Harpo Studios for a new show that Rosie O'Donnell was going to have. And they were having trouble finding producers. And she called me up and said, hey, would you like to, would you like this gig? Would you like to come over? And I'm thinking, yeah, I definitely want to come to Harpo and work for Rosie O'Donnell. And so I walked over and she had explained everything to Rosie about me, and Rosie said, hire him. And I got there, and we were kind of celebrating one night where we were out right afterwards, and everybody was out getting drinks. And I asked her, I said, why me? I mean, so many people in town, and she said, well, number one, I believe you're very talented and you're the type of guy for this job, but I will tell you another reason why. She said, when I was an intern, and I didn't remember this story at all. When I was an intern at Fox, this is when we were working with Tamron Hall. I had, Bob Surratt had asked me to get some footage for him. And I was up to my neck on producing a couple of segments that day. So Stacy was there, and I said to her, hey, we need this footage pulled for Bob. He wants to roll it. And it was I wish I could remember the name of the person, but there were two people with the same name. Okay. So she pulls the wrong footage and it rolls, and Bob goes live with this and it's wrong. And the only time Bob ever raised his voice to me was at that time, and he chewed my butt in the post-mortem meeting. Like that, we can't do that stuff. It's not there. Stacy was in the meeting, and I just took the hit because you do, right? It was ultimately my responsibility. Well, she never forgot that because she thought for sure she was going to get fired, that I was going to blame her for not doing it. She'd been in situations like that before, but it never occurred to me, and I never remembered that story, but it stuck with her. And my lesson there is that, be kind to the people below you, because you never know if they're going to be the people above you, because she ended up hiring me. And that, if I had not gotten that job at Harpo Studios, there would have been no possible way that I would have gone on to Steve Harvey, worked there for 5 years, won 2 more Emmys. It wouldn't have happened, because the connections that were made there, some of those people, because this is how it works, right? Moved from that show after it ended right over to the Steve Harvey show. And because of what I had done on that show and proved my worth, they brought me along with it. It's just it's a crazy story. And it turns out that young intern ended up marrying Lou Hinkhouse, the guy who I produced the Smashing Pumpkins thing with. This business is very incestuous. Even in Chicago, where you think it's a big town, it's like, boy, everybody knows. Everybody knows everybody.
Well, it is about networking or relationships. And as we talk with our students a lot about, how important it is to maintain relationships. And as you said, you never know how, what you're doing along this trip of life here, how you're treating other people. You need to be aware that, you're building bridges.
You do both ways, right? And I mean, because there are going to be times too where you can be that person that helps that person with a leg up or whatever, because you know that they're talented or whatever that is. I was never that type of person, but that was such a great lesson to learn, about be good to everybody around you. It's easy to do, and you just never know. You just never know who's going to. There's been a lot of people that surprised me who burst out, and became superstars. John Hamm, one of them.
And that's why I was going to ask you. Now, if you see anything on social media, there are these little polls where one of the questions is, have you ever met a celebrity? And then, somebody will say, yes, I've met, informally one person. So I think it's amazing, probably the number of celebrities that you have met. And
yeah, it's crazy.
And so, who's your favorite? I mean, I think that's what I would want to know. Who's somebody that you would say, this person is really much cooler than you ever imagined?
Well, you know what? So many of them were really cool. Now, I think a lot of that has to do when it's in situations where I was the producer, bringing them onto a show. They're going to kind of be a little bit nicer to you because you're the conduit. You're the person booking them. You're the person producing that, and you're the person getting them on the air. But one of the ones that was a pleasant surprise to me, one of the most pleasant surprises that stick with me is Elton John, who I was a huge fan of growing up here in Macomb.
Oh yeah.
I mean, not the hits. Like I was an album guy. Like I was deep into Elton John. And there weren't many my friends that were that way. They knew Elton John and the hits, but not like I know. And when I got the job at WLS Radio in Chicago with Ro Khan, my first day working with him was live at the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, where Barack Obama was nominated as the presidential candidate. So I'm not even working with him in the studio. We hadn't even worked together at all yet, and now we're doing live. We're just pulling celebrities and that stuff. But I had done that all my life, and we did a pretty good job out there and really forged a good bond, because at night we were just hanging out together. And we realized he expressed to me, and I know how it came up, his love of Elton John in the way that I had a love for Elton John, like deep-seated, knowing lyrics, obscure lyrics off of records, like we're like, whoa, hey, kindred spirit here. So we had a couple of cocktails and we were sitting there talking, and, I was like, you know what, Ro, before my tenure with you is over, we're going to do an interview with Elton John, and not on the phone, like you can do in radio. We're going to meet him face to face and we're going to do an interview. I had no possible connections, concept. I was just talking out of my butt on that one, right? The cocktails has gotten to me. Then I thought, well, I got to figure out how to pay off on this. And, and I kind of want to meet Elton John too. He's, been one of my musical heroes. So I was very well connected with the people in Chicago that brought the Broadway shows, and we would book them all the time. And I was working with them and said, hey, I know Elton works with Broadway shows now. He's writing those. So if any one of those shows comes, and for some strange reason Elton comes to town to promote one of those things, I want to be first on the list. And then for 2 years, whenever they called me and wanted to bring somebody on the radio, I put him on. I booked him with him out to that. I'd go, Ro, we might get Elton because of this shit. So I would put him on. And then one day, magically, we get the call. And they said, Elton's coming to town. Elton's going to do one radio show. He's going to do your show.
Oh, no.
And, be there at this time. And I walked in. It was during one of the shows. I walked in, Ro, and I said, yeah. Told you I was going to get you Elton. We got Elton. It's next Thursday at 2:00 or whenever it was. Now, here's one of our heroes going there. But Elton has a bit of a reputation too, right? I like being cantankerous and can be a little very particular. Not that he hasn't earned it. And it was always fearful for me. This kind of happened to me with George Carlin too, where, he'd gotten to a point where he was cranky and you're afraid to death that, I don't want to have a bad experience with this person, right? Because I love him so much. George, by the way, was a sweetheart. He wasn't a bad guy at all. So we get down there, and then I'm feeling pretty good. Like, I made this Elton John thing happen, right? So we get there, and we meet Elton. We never get nervous around people. We're around celebrities so often that it just becomes part of the job. But Ro had been doing this for 25 years. We were nervous about this thing. Elton comes in, completely puts us at ease and says, so the reason why I picked you guys is that WLS was the radio station that broke my career in the United States. If WLS hadn't played, my songs,
mm-hmm.
That was in the center of the country, went both ways, I wouldn't have. I could have broken New York, but it wouldn't have been the same, or California. Hitting the Midwest and covering that, made me a superstar. So it had nothing to do with me. But we didn't care. But he couldn't have been the nicest guy. And, at the end, we're all like, we all want our picture with Elton, but it's like, I don't want to ask him because I don't want to have Elton's last thing be he's pissed at us. So Elton at the end says, well, aren't we going to get our photographs together? And so, it was kind of magical. He couldn't have been nicer. He couldn't have been sweeter. He didn't need to be.
Amazing.
And it was just
a dream come true.
A guy growing up here in Macomb, playing Elton John records in my basement, loving this guy, never in a million years. And, I had already been in the business for a while. At that point, I thought, if this was going to happen, there are these people that you get on, and there are big names, but Elton was on a superstar level. It's like the Stones or the Beatles. I mean, the odds of meeting them are not great. So that was a great triumph for us on our radio show, being the only people to get Elton, having the exclusive, but also that, that 20 minutes we spent with him was, I'll never forget it. You know what I mean? It was just a very, very, very cool moment. And he made us feel so comfortable. He was just a sweetheart. He couldn't have been nicer. He was very, very, very kind and conscious of us being fans. I thought that was very cool of him.
That is, that's so good to know that you had a good experience with him.
I've had very few bad experiences with performers. I really have.
I have to ask you about John Hamm. So, tell me about your experience with him.
Well, this is my actor days, right?
Okay.
So I'm still, trying to clunk around and be an actor. And there was a guy that we met. Here's another Western connection. There was a guy that had come down while we were, some of us theater students came down to do a workshop on improvisation, which, you know, is another thing that kind of moved me in that direction. Improvisation comedy. He gave these workshops. His name is John Mayer. And he came down and taught us some of these workshops, and we started our own kind of improv comedy thing down here. And John ended up, at the time, he was like this, you know, kind of hippie performer, like, you guys shouldn't be in college, you should be out there doing it. Well, it turns out, you know, he influenced up, but we were a bigger influence on him. We all graduated, and John came down and went to school at Western. And then he got his degree, and he got his master's degree. And then he went on to get his doctorate, and he became a theater professor. So he's down at Columbia, Missouri, teaching theater. Well, he's got all these scraggly, you know, trying to make and meet actors in Chicago that want to, you know, that need a gig. So he had to direct plays. So what he would do is bring in professionals, you know, not any named professionals, but he brought us down, and we, for about 3 years, we did different plays. We did Shakespeare, and so there was a young guy there that had been doing some improv comedy that John knew, and hadn't really done any, you know, real acting before. He auditions. His name's John Hamm. He's really good. He's like a freshman, maybe a sophomore, not quite sure. And he gets cast as one of the ingenues in A Midsummer Night's Dream, which my friend was directing. And so, you know, he looked up at all of us. We were the actors from Chicago. You know, we all stayed in a house together, and he would be over there and hang out with us and, you know, party with us. And again, John was really good. Like a lot of the people in that play, he was good. He did stand out. But never would I have guessed in a million years that John Hamm would become John Hamm, you know. And, you know, we kind of stayed in touch, but it's just one of those things where you move on and that stuff. But I still have John's cell phone. I never really abuse it, but if I ever text him or send him a call, he immediately answers it and says something to me. And he doesn't need to, but, you know, it's funny when you think back at that. You know, I think the reason why he still feels a connection to us is that he looked up to us, and at that time we treated him well. Here's another example of treating people well. We treated him well. We treated him like one of us. We liked him, and he wasn't anybody at the time, you know. So he knows we knew him when. We're not there just to be sycophants. We're his old friends. But man, I would have never guessed that this guy, again, that's the thing. You know, it's because it's not always about talent and that stuff either. It's being in the right place at the right time. Yeah. You can never know that these people are going to blow up and be what they're going to be. Not that they're not talented, just the odds of it. I mean, I know so many, mind-bogglingly talented people that, you know, just never got that one break, you know, just that one thing. And it's the same thing for me. You know, not that I was, you know, this giant national phenom, but that it just took a couple of these breaks to set everything in motion the other direction. If it hadn't gone that way, who knows what might have happened, you know, where I might have been. It's just a lot of luck involved. Incredible amount of talent you need, but man, the luck is really big. And so keeping yourself open to all of those things, being kind to everybody you know, forging those connections. Because those are the things that get you the gigs. The talent then lets you keep the gig, right? It's the connections that get you the gig.
So you still offer some media training services. So you still keep your hands in the business in terms of that. You still.
I do, you know, for here, I will say the transition coming back, and the reason why I came back to Macomb was it was just at that point in my life where my quality of life was, you know, could I have made the move to California or New York? I think I could have pretty easily and gotten work and had connections and gotten those jobs. But, you know, I was in my late 50s, you know, at that time. And is that what I wanted? It's a young person's gig. And I was ready, you know, like we talked about with the Emmys and that stuff. I had proved to myself what I can do. I knew what it was possible for me to do. I knew that I could have achieved more. It was like, but is that, you know, how much work do I want to put in it? Do I need to do that? Do I need to keep shoveling coal into the ego engine, you know?
Yeah.
So my quality of life coming back here was the thing that made that difference. So I had a thought there. Where was I going? Oh, so how do I keep my hands in the business? It's really amazing when you're a producer that, you know, how that skill can apply to so many different things, because almost everything that you do, you need to produce on some level. And so here, I'm still producing these types of things, whether it's, you know, permanent attractions, creating these things. But at the same time, to promote all these things, we need TV spots, we need radio spots, you know, we need print and social media. I can produce our television spots because of my background in radio and being on the air in radio with my brother down in Champaign at WEBX and in Milwaukee with him. I can voice them. I can write them. You know, I can write copy. I can do all that stuff. I can, you know, so I still get to do that to a certain extent. It's not on the level that I was doing it before, but I can apply all those skills to it. And it, you know, it keeps those gears oiled, and it's still fun for me. I mean, the reason why I got into production in the first place is that I loved it. You know, I like doing it, even when it's difficult. So it's been so I do keep those muscles toned, and I, you know, I really enjoy it. And then I get to do stuff like this, you know?
Yeah. Well, as we kind of wrap things up here, Jock, can you give any recommendations to a college student that might be interested in terms of finding their path like you did? It's going to be hard to follow that same path, but somebody that feels that they have this creative energy, that they have interest in maybe doing something in front of the camera, but also maybe doing some things behind the camera, what kind of recommendation would you give them?
Well, I would say this, that trust your talent. Don't overfeed that talent. You know, trust that talent within realistic guidelines as, you know, who you are. Because when you get out there, man, there's a lot of talent. You know, you might be the best person at the university, but when you get into it's like, you know, professional sports. You keep moving up into each tier, man, the competition gets more and more fierce. But keep yourself open to possibilities and try to learn everything that you can. Don't get myopic about your approach to what you want to do. If you just want to be on you know, an anchor or whatever, you know, still learn how to be a reporter. You know, that's going to be important. Too much of this now is so specialized that, you know, if you're just an actor, you're just there reading or that you don't need to be a reporter of those things. Learn how, you know, to work the camera and to edit. And even if that's not what you end up going into, that you understand that process. Yeah. That if you're going to be a director, you know, I never learned how to physically edit anything, but I understood the process so I could direct my editors, so I could, you know, tell them exactly what I needed to do. And be nimble, right? I mean, take a chance. You don't know where that road's going to take you, and it might take you a little longer to get where you want to go. But what you might learn in that process could be so applicable to where you end up. And I guess the final thing would be, you know, don't necessarily trust your roadmap. You know what I mean? It's not always from point A, you know, to point Z. Mm-hmm. Don't get blinders on, you know what I mean? Take the road less traveled, because you'll be surprised at what you might end up doing that actually was your calling, but you had an idea of what it is that you were supposed to be. Open yourself up to more possibilities. And I think that you'll, if nothing else, find a much more interesting life and much more pleasure out of it.
Well, Jock, I feel like we probably could have had another entire episode. I've enjoyed this conversation with you so much. It's just
well, I thank you. I mean, I'm pleased and honored to be here, and I love Macomb and I love WIU, and I'll be a Macomb homie and a Leatherneck all my life.
That's well said. Thank you so much, Jock, for being on the podcast. And thanks to our viewers out there. Make sure to join us again next week when we'll have another alum on the podcast. If you are interested in being a guest or want to recommend someone else, just send me an email. We want to hear from our alums, and we'd love to hear from you. And we, of course, hope that you continue watching and listening to the podcast every week and really enjoy your support. So until next week, stay safe, take care, and God bless.